Good afternoon. Calling to order Environmental Matters Committee for Thursday, April 10th. Sheila, could you mute? Oh, you did. So let's see. We do need to make a modification to the agenda.
We do roll call first.
Oh yeah, sorry. Roll call.
Here.
Alderman Arnett, Alderwoman Finlayson.
You said here.
Oh.
Present.
All right. And as far as the agenda, you need to remove ID 6825 and then postpone it, sorry. And then move ID 4625 to the front of the agenda. So with
what ID what to the front?
ID 4525, which is 4625, which is the solar park pollinator habitat project. We have some people presented to us virtually.
I move the agenda with the amendments.
You will second that?
I will second it.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. All right. So that brings us to the pollinator presentation. Deputy City Manager, Jackie.
Excuse me, I didn't hear what you said.
I said that. Can you
Oh, yes.
introduce us for the?
Yes. So we have a presentation from Jackie Guile, Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. Now we have a presentation from Larry Weiner, Landscape Associates. This is the consultant the city has retained to evaluate and design pollinator habitat at the city's solar park off of Defense Highway. So the city staff have been working with this company we have done several site walks to evaluate the property, the topography, the soils, and assess it for where we could put pollinator habitat, where it will work inside and outside of the fence. And they have come up with a draft design, which Dylan Lakonich, the environmental programs coordinator, and myself provided feedback on, and there were some revisions made. So they are here today to present the plan to you and provide some other additional information about the project and take questions. I would also add that we have been working this entire time on this project with the Department of Public Works because Public Works monitors the site for gas and other environmental contamination through a consent agreement with the Maryland Department of the Environment. And there are also some best management practices out there for stormwater mitigation, which we have to be careful of and aware of as we do the work here. So I'm going to turn this over now to Larry Weiner, Landscape Associates, for them to introduce themselves and proceed with their presentation.
Hello, I'm Ethan Dropkin. I'm an associate and the horticultural specialist at Larry Weiner Landscape Associates.
I'm Rebecca Cagle, Managing Principal at LWLA.
I'm Morgana Tetherow Keller, Landscape Designer at LWLA.
And so we have a presentation for you today of the proposed meadow at the solar park. So the project location is the solar park at 420 Defense Highway in Annapolis. This is the existing condition, which the majority of it is the solar field, which is all fenced on top of a capped landfill. And we took soil samples to find out what the condition of the soil was. The pH ranged from 4.7 to 6.9, which makes sense considering it was capped soil that was brought from off-site. But for our purposes, that pH range and the fact that it's sandy loam to sandy clay loam is acceptable for establishing a meadow. So we're very happy about that. This is the site preparation plan, and so you can see that cross-hatched area are the areas that we are proposing doing the work in. We're not working on any slopes greater than 15%, with sensitivity towards the fact that it's capped landfill, and we just both we and the direction that we got from the city was to stay out of any areas that were greater than 15%, so that we didn't risk any unnecessary erosion or disturbance of the soil over the cap. What we are proposing doing is using herbicide to treat the vegetation in that crosshatch area to denude it of any existing vegetation so that we can overseed it with a diverse mix of native plant species and successfully establish a seeded meadow that will both hold the soil in place, be attractive to native pollinators and provide really excellent habitat for them, and provide really aesthetic surround for the solar park, which has public trails that pass through it. In terms of site preparation, the plan that is proposed is in year one, we would do one spray in September, followed by a mow either in late September or October to kind of cut back any of the dead vegetation, followed by 2 sprays in spring with subsequent mows, and then a seeding in July to establish the meadow. Now, we are very sensitive to the fact that it's a city project on city property, and there are a lot of different parties that are involved and different reasons why the schedule might need to shift. So alternatively, if we needed to start the project in spring rather than fall, we could do 2 sprays in spring or spring into early summer. A spray in fall, and then the seeding would be a dormant seeding that would happen in November and December, and then sort of the first growing year would be the following year. In terms of maintenance, in the first growing season, we would recommend monthly mowings with the goal of keeping the nurse crop, which would be a non-native annual grass that would sort of serve as shade and erosion control matrix in between the native seedlings. But we want to keep that cut back so that it's not smothering the native plants. We also want to do monthly mowing so that if any annual weeds do resprout, we're keeping them cut back so that they're not allowed to flower and produce seed and lay down a new layer of annual seed, which would be problematic because then they become part of the long-term matrix, which we'd really like to try to avoid. We would also monitor for weeds, for perennial weeds and for annual weeds. In twice during the season, we have it here in June and July, but that could shift kind of based on what we're seeing as part of the regrowth. And then theoretically, we would do an evergreen treatment for things like Japanese honeysuckle that can be treated later in the season when you don't have the chance of treating any of the other plants that they're growing in between, but they'll still uptake the herbicide and it's still effective when other plants are dormant. In the second growing season, so the way that the landfill has to be managed is that there have to be 2 mows during the growing season. And so what we're recommending is a June mow and an October mow with the goal of kind of mowing in between spring flowering and summer flowering and doing a cutback that would kind of make the meadow come back denser and shorter in June, and then an October cutting to sort of, as the meadow's shutting down, most of the kind of fall flowers will have gone through what they need to go through and have provided pollinator value, and then do a cutback probably in late October. Those dates could shift based on our conversations with the city and sort of what matches their needs for maintenance of the site. But that's kind of our thought now is those two windows would be the best for mowing. Path mowing would happen whenever, and you'd have monitoring for problem weeds and spot treatment. So very targeted individual treatment of plants with herbicide. Twice during the growing season. We have it in May and August, but as I said, that can shift depending on what weeds we're seeing out there. And then in year 3, it would be similar. We might shift to biannual mowing, like a March mow, but I think most likely we'd stick to that 2 mow window, just because of the city's needs. And again, we'd continue monitoring and targeted spot treatment with herbicide of any weeds. Most likely over time, that weed pressure will drop. And so we may be able to go down to 1 spot treatment or no spot treatments, or if it is the city's desire, we can probably shift to a way where we're able to phase out herbicide entirely over time and just focus on manual control of any non-target species. So this is the actual planting plan. So the seeding area was created through a combination of conversations with the city, not wanting to disturb any slopes that are over 15%, and talking with Novus, the solar company, about what they were comfortable with. And so what we came up with was an area that includes within the fence, so between the fence and the solar field, where it is possible, we left at least a 10-foot offset from any of the solar panels so that we're not getting into any interactions with the maintenance and the solar panels themselves, and allowing them to kind of have a mode offset. Also, that mix within the fence, that M1 mix, tops out around 2 to 3 feet or 3 to 4 feet. But most things kind of top out at 3 feet, with the goal of keeping that a little shorter, because that was a directive from Novus that they didn't want the meadow to get too tall inside the fence. M2 is outside the fence. There are a lot of shared species. M1 and M2 are very similar, but for the fact that M2 includes some species that get more in the 4 to 5 foot range. But in general, that one, the inside the fence will be kind of 2 to 3 feet, and outside the fence would be 3 to 4 feet as the height, the tallest possible height range for the meadow. That said, with those mid-season mowings, with that June cutback, it's likely that all the meadows will kind of top out shorter than if we weren't doing a mid-season mowing. And then finally, you'll see up at the top left, there's an M3, and that's at the bottom of a stormwater basin. So that mix has a little bit more moisture tolerance. It's not a wetland mix because the basin was designed to be very well draining, but it does include some plants that can tolerate both more moisture and a fair amount of drought. So it's pretty simple. It's 3 mixes that are all doing their part. As I said, and I didn't mention this before, there are also shared species between M3, M2, and M1. So it's not going to read as these 3 totally separate things, but more likely it'll read as kind of a continuum across the site. These are the seed mixes that we're proposing. I'm not necessarily going to go through each species individually, but I will note that we pulled together a pollinator reference chart. Excuse me, sorry about that. And so you can see we have whether the plant is a host plant or provides nectar and pollen, or both. And we have kind of a number system that apply to these pollinators, and the pollinators that we picked, this is a short list of the possible pollinators that could be found on site. The top 4 are all mid-Atlantic species that are rare or in decline, that have been observed in a close enough radius to the site that it is likely that if we install a native meadow there, that they'll show up and utilize the site. And then 5 through 14 are just more common species, all of which using iNaturalist, which is a citizen science organism recording program or site. We were able to sort of see, okay, what are the native pollinators that have been observed close enough to the site that they are likely to be on site, but 5 through 14 are more common species, whereas 1 through 4 are more rare species. So you'll see we have a good diversity of a lot of different species, native plants that are going to provide. You can see almost all of them have host plant or nectary capabilities for pollinators, and you can see for some of them it's just one, for some of them it's almost all of the ones that we have listed. So we really tried to keep that in mind when we were putting together our plant lists. So this is kind of a walkthrough of what the site may look like over the course of meadow establishment. So first, we've got bare soil. This is, the site's been sprayed, all the existing vegetation is removed through spraying and mowing. And then we come in on that bare soil and using a no-till drill seeder, which is a piece of machinery that doesn't. You can see there's sort of these little, very slight depressions, those lines in the soil. So it's not doing a ton of soil disturbance. It's just very lightly doing a small depression and dropping the seeds into it so that we're sure we get the best seed to soil contact we can. And then, so in the first growing season, you'd get sort of this green haze over the whole site. It would probably look fairly similar to a rough lawn, particularly because we'd be recommending those monthly mowings to, like I said, keep the nurse crop cut back and also cut back any annual weeds. The second growing season is when we'd start to get a real flush of a lot of color and floral interest and pollinator interest. So things like the black-eyed Susans that you see here, they're short-lived species. So that means they germinate really quickly, they grow really fast, and they flower very early on in the life of the meadow. But long-term, those individual species are going to drop out in favor of more long-lived species. So you can see there's tons of black-eyed Susan in the second year. In the third year, it's still present, but it's not as a kind of much of a blanket over the whole site, and you can see that there are more long-lived species starting to flower and become more apparent. And then year 3 and beyond, the meadow just will get more mature, more diversity start to show up, and you can see, the black-eyed Susan is gone, and we have a very diverse meadow. And then these are just some precedent images of what the meadow might look like on this site. Based on the seed mixes that we put together. So you can see, floriferous, but still some nice grassy texture. In the woodland edges, where there's a little bit more shade, it might look a little different, or there may be some species that are really prominent in the woodland edges and sort of speckled out in the sunnier parts of the meadow. And then the basin would be more of, like I said, not true wetland, but species that have more wet tolerance than the plants that are up on the hill. So with that, I will stop my presentation, and I would love to hear questions from you all.
All right, so open up to the committee. Any questions? And I can't see Alderwoman Finlayson.
There she is.
Oh, there you are. Are there questions from the committee? Alderman Arnett?
First one, can we get a copy of this presentation? Because I'd like to review it, certainly look at the seeds more closely, but also the schedule. And my overall, all along concern has been about weed killer as opposed to other forms. I guess one of the questions I want to ask about spraying is, does it only kill weeds? Does it transmit to other kinds of animal life, or what kinds of considerations do we have there?
That is a great question. So we at LWLA take herbicide use very seriously. We feel like it is a very useful and essential tool for the work that we do, but all of us are with you. If we felt like we didn't need to use it, we wouldn't. And there are plenty of projects where we don't. And even on a project like this where we are using it, we're also going to recommend mechanical control for the species that can be mechanically controlled, rather than just saying just spray it with herbicide all the time, anytime. That said, also all the herbicides that we will use will not have a target have an effect on non-target organisms. And even though we wouldn't necessarily need to use it, we almost always recommend using aquatic approved versions of the herbicides, which means they are safe to spray in aquatic systems. So even though this isn't an aquatic system, and even though with a licensed applicator, you're never going to wind up in a situation where they're spraying so much that it's like running off the plants and running down the hill and running into a pond. That's not. You just need to barely kind of wet the plants that you're trying to kill. But any of the herbicides that we would use are things that are going to be aquatic approved. So even if by some crazy chance they did wind up in one of the surrounding water bodies, which is, like I said, not really possible, it will not have an effect.
Well, thank you for that. There is, of course, the old reservoir right down the hill from here. So it might not be an aquatic environment itself, but it's pretty darn close.
So I have one question. Well, two questions. What's the total square footage of the areas that you'd be planting?
That's a good question. I don't remember off the top of my head, but we can get you that information when we send you the proposal.
I believe
Or,
it's
I mean, the
roughly,
presentation.
I
I'm
believe
sorry.
it's roughly 18 acres.
There we go.
18 acres.
Yeah, that's what it says in.
Well, the whole facility is, but are the planting? No.
No, the facility, the entire area is 80 acres, and then there's facility itself is about 50, 55 acres, but they're planning to plant, I think it's 18.2 acres, something like that.
Wow, okay, that's
to
a
be
lot
on
more
there.
than I thought. That's good. So I know you said some of it's outside the fence, and I don't recall off the top of my head how high that fence is or if it has barbed wire, but have you looked at, is there going to be a need to do any kind of deer exclusions or deer deterrence? Because I imagine they're going to have quite a bit. If they get past the fence, I imagine they're going to have a banquet there on some of the flowers when they start growing.
So that's a good question. So the seated area is both inside and outside the fence. And while if you're doing like in your home garden where you have, plants and there's mulch around them, there's space in between the plants, that's a deer buffet because they can walk right up and just eat, and you have individual plants all separated from one another. They can go and just munch from each individual plant. In a seeded meadow, because you have so many plants all intermixed together very close to one another, because the seeds go down as kind of a blanket across the whole site. When that grows up, it's so dense and intermixed and so intermingled with things that they like to eat and things that they don't like to eat that generally, in our experience, excuse me, deer pressure isn't a huge issue in a seeded meadow, and certainly nowhere near the same way it is with a planted garden bed. So generally, we don't have to do serious deer mitigation strategies in seeded meadows. In other plantings, that can be the case, but like I said, because of how intermixed and intermingled the seeded material is, they go in to get a mouthful of an aster that they really like, and they get an aster mixed with grasses and mixed with native mints that they aren't as interested in, and they back away. And you can actually see in some of our meadows, let's say all the grass tops out at 3 feet. anything that stuck up above that 3 feet, the asters are nipped off, but down below you can still see all the flowers blooming in amongst the grasses because the deer aren't going in and kind of cherry picking because they just can't get in between all the stems of the plants.
They'll still walk around and bed down in the meadow, if that's sort of part of their route, but it doesn't have a long-term impact.
Yeah. I will say, I've been out there many, many times. I think the fence is 8 to 10 feet. It looks higher than 8 feet to me. It does not have barbed wire at the top, but I think it is exposed. The ends of the fencing are exposed at the top. Never seen deer inside the park before, the solar park. I've actually not seen them on the outside either. There's probably better things to eat in the forest and surrounding areas right now. I don't see the deer jumping that fence. I've seen deer do some incredible jumping, but that fence is pretty high.
Yeah, 8 feet, it definitely gets to a level they may not want to jump. All right, any other questions from the committee?
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for your presentation.
And I will have the Larry Weiner send the PowerPoint to me so I can send it to the entire council.
Thank you. All right, so next up on the agenda, I did forgot to do minutes approval.
Move approval of the minutes.
I don't see Alderman Finlayson, so I will second that. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, and then jumping into legislation, we have R225 demonstration program to build green roofs on city bus shelters. Is there a report from anybody on that?
Apart from what I mentioned at the last meeting, since then, I did do a tour of our bus shelters with the Director of Transportation and Donovan Harold from the Department of Public Works. We looked at different types of bus shelters, and basically the city has 3 kinds. The domed shelters, which are hard plastic, are not owned by the city. They're owned by an advertising company. And the dome also precludes, planting of a green roof on them. The other type of shelter is a typical roof, kind of slanted on both sides type of shelter. Again, not conducive to a green roof. Could be done, but much more difficult. So the last type is the flat roofed shelters. And we have them all over the city. We looked on Forest Drive, on Hilltop and West Street, mostly at ones that we thought would be suitable locations because of sunlight exposure, not a lot of tree cover, and also there being flat roof structures owned by the city on which we could plant. And so there's a list of them. There's probably, we identified about 8 that we thought were potential. And under the pilot program, we are supposed to identify 5 bus shelters for the green roofs. Now, we identify these as potential planting areas, but they still would need further evaluation depending on what type of green roof is installed, whether they are structurally sound to support a green roof, and if there would be any additional improvements needed to them in order to support a green roof. And drainage for the green roof, et cetera, would have to be added.
Yeah, I remember. So the last meeting we talked about, let's see, we needed to get square footage estimated for, I think, how many shelters did you say?
5 are identified in the legislation, 5 for the pilot program.
5. And do we have any other? So I know you were just going over the different types of shelters. Which ones did you think would be most compatible?
The flat roofed shelters. And they're sturdier. They're some form of metal, steel construction rather than the plastic.
And those, how many of those do we have?
I'd have to look up the number of those we actually have. We identified about 8 of them that we thought were in a good location to sustain a green roof.
Alderwoman Finlayson, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm afraid I got kicked out. So sounds like you're talking about the green roofs on the bus shelters. My question was related to the pollinator program. Can I still ask that question? Or would you rather wait until you finish the bus shelter discussion?
You can go ahead.
Okay, looking at the diagram, and I was trying to follow what I think was the last diagram, which listed all of the plants, and the speaker was outlining which was first, second, and third, and I was not able to follow which of those diagrams he was referring to. Will we get that presentation so I can go back and look and be more accurate with my question?
Yes, I will get that presentation from the consultant and send it to the entire council. I sent a message out this afternoon to all the council members telling them they can view this presentation on YouTube and that I will follow up with the PowerPoint so we can take additional questions as staff. If we can't answer them, we'll have our consultant answer them for you.
Okay, great. Does the contract include all of the needs for the solar park or for the pollinator park, including the mowings and the seeding? And I mean, is all of that included in this contract, or is there another contract to come?
It does not. So the current contract we have with this company is to do the monitoring, the assessment, the feasibility, and the design plan, including all of the plants, the maintenance plan, what they think this would cost us to implement. We have additional funds. This only took about $12,000 out of the $105,000 allocated to this project for the first year. And so we have sufficient funds to implement the project, to do the site preparation and the planting and the spot herbicides. We have plenty of money for that. The mowing is not included, so the ongoing maintenance. Public Works conducts mowing outside of the fence currently, and this project would reduce some of the required mowing out of their budget. And Novus Renewables does mowing inside the fence. So this is something, an anticipated expense that we already have. And in fact, in these areas, we would not be mowing as often.
It sounds as if the mowing as well as the seeding requires some knowledge, some expert knowledge. So will there be an opportunity to train our staff or whomever is going to be responsible?
Yes. So Larry, this consultant will provide us with the maintenance schedule on how and where to mow, what type of equipment to use. It's not difficult. It's basically at a certain time of the year and at what length to cut the pollinator garden.
Okay,
And then the spot treatment with herbicide, especially as the years go by, you have less and less of that need. However, you do want to spot treat anything woody, things that are starting to grow trees or large bushes in the area that can take over the pollinator garden, and definitely inside the fence because you don't want anything trying to penetrate the membrane over the landfill.
Well, I recall the tour that we took out there, and I hope to be around to see at least the first phase of this and to see some growth going out there.
So, and to that point, Alderwoman, we have the draft plan. We would be ready to proceed this fall. However, there is ongoing monitoring required by the Maryland Department of the Environment, and we don't want to disturb the site right now and have some bare areas and things where there's a little bit of tilling, although it's very, very minimal tilling to prepare the site and won't come anywhere near the membrane. We don't want to raise any concerns by MDE so that they decide they can't sign off on our continuing monitoring. We're filing a report this fall in answering all of their questions about the site, and hopefully they will sign off on the site by the spring. That's the earliest we can expect it, by spring 2026. If we get an all clear by then, as the presenters said, they can modify the schedule and start in the spring rather than the fall of 2026. If they do not, we would start in the fall of 2026.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, back to the bus shelter. Any questions from the committee?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there additional infrastructure requirements like bringing water service or any other kind of service to these pilot sites?
Yes, so they do require watering. If there's not sufficient rainfall, we'd have to be on a schedule for watering of the green roofs. There would have to be maintenance weeding. Obviously, you don't want the plants you're putting there not to survive because of taken over by weeds. Also, there is some mortality of the plants, especially when you first put in the nurse crop. And so you have replacement planting needed as well. So we would either we'll have to hire a consultant, which is not part of the legislation, but which I have discussed with Alderman Gay, about hiring a consultant and having funds for that to design the green roofs based on what we have and to make an assessment of whether the bus shelters we have are suitable for green roofs. And if they are, if any additional improvements need to be made to them, as I said, any structural improvements, any drainage type of improvements, which I imagine there would be. And then what sort of maintenance and who can perform that? Do we do that in-house, or are we understaffed for that? Do we use that company or some other company that's trained and has the know-how to maintain a green roof? We do have an existing contract, or we just got out the RFP for it, I believe through Public Works, for green roof maintenance at both the police station, at Hudson Street, at the Public Works Maintenance Building, and at Pitt Moyer, because they all have green roofs. Pitt Moyer especially is in need of some rehabilitation and better care. So we do have an RFP out. I spoke with our procurement officer. He could amend that contract and add some more funds to it for maintenance and care of the green roofs on the bus shelters.
So I'm trying to figure out, this is the Environmental Matters Committee, and I'm trying to figure out the biggest bang for the buck for the environment. Did I understand you to say that there are only 8 of these shelters and we're targeting 5 for the pilot study?
Yes. So the pilot study and the legislation requires 5 shelters. Perhaps this hasn't been passed yet, so perhaps you amend it for more or less bus shelters. We looked at 8 that we thought were promising. And there might be some, we could add to that. We wanted to come up with more than 5 because some of them may not be structurally appropriate.
So bang for the buck. The reason we're doing this, aside from it feels good, is that it's going to help control rainwater runoff.
Control and filtration of stormwater, rainwater. Also, they do provide a benefit in that they provide habitat, they're aesthetically pleasing, and that they also can absorb carbon dioxide from the air, and they can provide a cooling effect in the immediate area of the green roof.
So on the theory that something is better than nothing, but yet compared to the Pip Moyer, which I did understand is not well maintained, how many square feet are we, if the maximum potential, the pilot is successful, how many square feet of filtering and habitat and so forth are we potentially providing?
To actually realize worthwhile benefits, bang for the buck, as you're putting it. I don't know the answer to that question. It's an excellent question. I'll have to do some research on that.
Okay. Because another alternative for the bus shelters, and maybe more broadly applicable, although I don't know the economies of this either, would be to put solar panels on.
That is occurring already. The Department of Transportation has funds to put solar panels, I believe, on half of our bus shelters.
Mhm.
So that's
And-
already,
and-
that's
and
going
with-
forth as a project.
With solar panels, we could have blinking signs for food trucks.
And they may be looking at the ones that are the roof-shaped ones I was referring to that are slanted like a roof in order to erect those. Those also could go on the flat ones.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know. I mean, I find myself to be lukewarm towards this. Again, something's better than nothing, but I don't have the sense that we're making a gesture more than a big impact. But are you looking for some kind of recommendation on this legislation at this point?
Well, I'll comment on that, but first I want to see if Alderwoman Finlayson has. I can't tell if you have your hand up. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have my hand up, but my question is, have we talked to Hyatt Realty, who has a green roof on the top of that building? That was one of the first ones that we had in the city. So did we have an opportunity to talk to them about how they've been able to develop it and whether it even still exists? And if not, why is that? Ms.
I have-
Geiler, directed to you, I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I have not had an opportunity. I will check with Donovan Harold in Public Works to see if he has spoken with them or looked into it at all and see what other information Public Works has when they were developing their RFP.
Okay, I think I asked that question previously. But anyway, because we do have some examples in the city that we should be able to learn from. And going to what Alderman Arnett was asking of the chair, it's a gesture, and I don't have a problem with the gesture as long as we have all of the information to make it work successfully. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I do agree. I think we need to keep in mind that this is a pilot to see if they're going to be worth expanding even more. And, you know, granted, we may need to scale back the pilot even more. But I think what I would say is my recommendation would be that we do recommend favorably, but make I think we should also clarify that even if this passes, it still needs to be fully implemented via the budget. It's going to have to be a budget amendment because this does not identify a source of funding, nor does it really narrow down exactly precisely what it's going to cost. And so I would say I'd like to see us recommend favorably, but say we would like information. We would like this to be turned into a budget amendment for full consideration, but that needs to include maintenance responsibilities and costs, exact location, and also estimate on the funding and then the funding source. And I guess we would make this a CIP project, I imagine. So,
Capital project.
but that's not something we have to decide today. In some fashion, it's going to have to get turned into
Are
a
you,
budget amendment.
I'm sorry, I'm working on another project over here. Are you talking about the green roofs on the bus shelters? I think we already have it in the project somewhere.
Is it?
Okay. I thought somewhere I remember seeing it, so I don't know what I'm thinking of, but okay.
Well, we could figure that out. But does the committee think that's a good approach?
Why not?
Is that a motion?
So as I understand your thought, the motion would be to recommend favorably, but to make sure that this is included in the budget in some way if it isn't already.
Yeah, because that's going to. Yes, because that's what's actually going to encumber the funding and identify location and.
So I'll make
Cost.
that motion.
I will second that motion, but I would like to add that it will be thoroughly investigated so we know exactly what it's going to cost upfront and long term.
I will find out as
Sounds
much
good.
information as I can for you, and we'll identify the shelters, the exact locations of the shelters. I have a binder that Mr. Harold provided me that has pictures of the shelters. even. So we can provide that in an amended staff report.
Okay. So all those in
That was the
favor?
second.
So all those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries unanimously. All right. I guess that's it for that legislation. Next up, we have plan and zoning development updates. Mr. Meekins, could you join us? I'm sorry, it's been a incredibly hectic week. I've not been able to prepare adequately for this. So if you could walk us through, looks like you have some new documents.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Mike Meekins, Senior Planner for Planning and Zoning. I did provide an updated email PDF of the spreadsheet that I had updated approximately 2 months ago for this group. Of note, really there are only two notable additions to the last update. So I will focus on those two. And then if you have any questions, we can go into any of the others or the two that I'm going to talk about. So the first one is 1942. This is actually at the top of the first sheet, 1942 West Street. It's a proposed auto zone retail building. It's actually the site of, if you're familiar with where the Chris's charcoal pit used to be.
West Street.
On West Street, yeah. So the site is comprised of mainly asphalt parking lot and two buildings. The front, the building that fronts West Street, I do not believe is occupied. The one in the rear, I'm not sure of, but the proposal is for a approximate 7,400 square foot auto parts retail store on the site, along with, of course, associated parking, underground stormwater management, and planting buffers. So that is, the applicant has resubmitted. We've been back and forth with the applicant to get the proposal into a manner in which current planning will be able to present that to the Planning Commission. And right now, it is on the schedule for the next Planning Commission meeting, May 1st.
Okay. On that, anything else on that project? Or
Well, I have a question.
No.
question two, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm struck with the disaster area that I consider this part of West Street to be, and how it is totally not complementary to the comprehensive plan. And so I'm wondering, are we doing the owner proposing this a disservice if in, say, 5 years from now, we want to come back and have mixed-use commercial there? I mean, I know we can't do it until somebody proposes it, but I almost wonder if we shouldn't be having some kind of warning, at least to the proprietors, but maybe even a moratorium on commercial, particularly auto-centric commercial redevelopment in this area, when in the long term, we'd really like it to be something different.
So that's a lot to speak about or to, but we've had, of course, one of the reviewers on the review team is our Chief of Comprehensive Planning, Eric Lashinsky. He actually made some two suggestions, one of which was a connection between the proposed or the project of the West East Express foot trail, a connection that would run from West Street on this property to that portion of the trail. That was not very. There wasn't much favor in that from the applicant, and it stems from a safety issue where you have the layout of this proposed building, which is perpendicular. The length of the building is perpendicular to West Street, and immediately next door is a building of similar proportion and scale. And the proposal would have had the footpath in between those buildings. So the applicant is looking at a safety concern. So the second part was Mr. Lashinsky in the comprehensive plan wanted the goal to, I'll say, soften the composure of that portion of West Street, which I completely agree with your assessment, was to relocate the required sidewalk away from the curb, away from the street, say approximately 5 feet, and create a buffer of sorts. So there were some logistics that came up with that in relation to who owns the right of way. It's actually state highway, and the applicant was receptive to allowing that sidewalk to move away from the street, and there would be a planting buffer. So obviously, there's a long stretch on both sides of the West Street in that vicinity that really need, in my estimation, something similar to this. So from Mr. Lashinsky's comments, it's I'll say, step in the right direction to kind of cushion, to soften the appearance of that area. Unfortunately, I can't speak about his thoughts on a mixed use environment in that area.
So let me throw this rejoinder out, and Alderman Savage just showed me the overhead picture, and it is such a war zone, bombed out area. It's terrible, but I sort of understand the safety concern, and I do understand fully that we're asking the applicants to do extra things, and extra things cost money. And so to that end, since it's budget season, and I'm throwing this out to my colleagues on the council, and particularly since we got such a glowing report from fiscal 24 from the finance director this morning, maybe we need to be thinking about establishing some sort of incentive fund to help property owners do things that, I mean, that is just a horrible wasteland of macadam, nothing attractive about it at all. But we have some sort of fund where we can help them, say, do plantings, do a stormwater pit or whatever we call it. I forget what we call the term of art. But in any event, I guess the place to have this conversation is for those of us that care about it at all to go to the Planning Commission when they hear it. But I just think we really struggled, and I've become a big fan of the comprehensive plan, and it just seems like we ought to start right now in moving in that direction. And if it's something where we need to provide financial incentives to get there, so be it. So I'll bring that up at the budget. But it just seems like we're plodding along doing more or less the same things all along and not really responding to a proposal for changing doing business. I feel like I'm lecturing you, and that's not my intent at all. I'm reacting to this plan and how it doesn't feel like we're moving the ball forward. But on the other hand, we can't mess around. This is private property and it's somebody's financial investment, and we have to be sensitive to that. And it's certainly probably better to have something in there than a vacant building. But boy, I wish we could do better. That's all I'm saying. Sorry to direct it at you, Mike.
No problem.
Alderwoman Finlayson, sorry, I can't tell if you have your hand up, so checking.
I do, and thank you. Mr. Meakin, isn't there an auto zone right down the street on West Street?
On the other side.
On the
Yeah,
other
but-
side of the street?
So I believe there's an auto zone at the corner of West Street and Solomon's Island Road, in behind the dispensary, and I don't know if that's in the county. And I know there is a auto parts store there. There's also a Pep Boys, which is across the street, or nearly across the street.
I think it's probably the Pep Boys that I'm thinking about. My question was going to be, are they planning to move or consolidate? And if it is the one down off of Chinkopin, that's where that weird city-county line comes through that shopping center, I believe. But if they have another location, and maybe this wasn't part of the discussion, are they moving from one location to another? Are they consolidating? Are they opening a new and different store, or is there any way of knowing?
Yeah, they're different stores, just to clarify. The one in near Gold Leaf is Advanced Auto Parts,
Advanced, okay.
and then
Okay.
there is a Pep
Pep
Boys,
Boys,
and then
yeah.
the new proposed. So there is not an auto zone currently in the city.
Thank you.
So we need a third one in a
Yeah.
2-block radius, it looks like.
Because we all have 4 or 5 cars and we have to keep them synchronized.
Thank you, that was my question.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that the sidewalk is getting expanded in the front. That was one thing I was going to say. It looks like that's what's being proposed.
Yes, it's a little hard to see. There's mainly from the plantings that are grouped there, but yeah, that was the ask, and the applicant was in agreement with that. So
Yeah.
small victory.
So I guess let's see. So a couple comments. One would be, well, as far as the Wee Trail, that is right in the back. You're saying they didn't want to do it because of safety concerns?
Yeah, the safety concerns with as you look at the property from West Street, the two buildings that are really close to the common property line on the right-hand side, they had a safety concern, and they have a local land use attorney who voiced that concern for them.
Well, I guess because the Wee Trail's been in our CIP for years. We've got all these goals in the comp plan to actually build out these trails. So what is it that's preventing us from just telling them, sorry, you have to do it?
Well, we're not at that stage yet.
Okay.
We're at the stage where I've teed it up as best as possible to get it in front of the Planning Commission. It's currently being circulated for a second round of reviews. So, that is not off the table.
Okay.
It's just a concern, and that's why I raised that. And
Yeah.
both of those stem from the original comments from comprehensive planning.
Okay. All right. But is that going to be in staff recommendations, or has it been already?
I have not written the staff report yet.
Okay.
it's still on the table. I'll put it that way.
Because if there's something else that we need to do policy wise, because again, and I know the administration, but also the council, we have all these plans and fund all these projects, but we really need, if there's something we need to do to allow staff to have the ability just to get them to do it, right? To get the developers to do it, then let us know. I think we definitely have an interest in seeing the vision of the comp plan realized.
Understood. And I think this is a good awakening, I'll say, or an alert to all the parties involved. That we're talking about this, and we will continue to talk about it, obviously, in front of the Planning Commission.
Okay, and a part of that, which I know we've not quite caught up as far as the regulation, but they have, I think, over 40 parking spaces. And it's a lot of new parking. And so I'm wondering is that being driven by our code requirements for minimum parking, or is it being driven by just the fact that this is essentially a box store that they want to put in, and that's what they're proposing? Or so are they proposing it, or is it something mandated in the code, or both?
So it's honestly being driven not by our code and the required parking. But the configuration of the property is such that they have, AutoZone apparently has their delivery vehicles that come in to the stores.
Mhm.
And given the footprint of this piece of property and their proposal, in order for them to get a delivery vehicle in to unload, they've got to, it's going to, I would hate to have to drive this truck, but they have a turning diagram to get in off of West Street, turn the truck around, come back, unload to get in and out solely on their property. Now, on the left-hand side, there's a common property line that's also asphalt, and then you have the Safelite Auto Parts or Safelite Auto Glass store next door.
I see. Yeah.
So it's just it's a combination of several moving targets, but mainly from my point of view, it is the access for that truck, because I've made comments regarding landscape and landscape islands, and that's why you see more robust landscape in the front and then towards the rear of the property on the right hand side. Versus I would love to see more landscape islands in the rear where a majority of the parking is. But the feasibility of that is the constraint of that is this vehicle turning.
Yeah, but I think, I don't know, I guess the important question for that would be, is it a need, or is it just a desire of theirs, right? Because we've got plenty of tight places for drop off delivery, truck delivery in the town. Even if they just have to pull in and then back out, it just seems silly to put in that much impervious surface just so they can have a truck turnaround on their property. Because we could just look at this. I really doubt they would even need any of that parking in the rear. They've got at least probably 20 or so around the building itself. So, I mean, that lot, you could convert the rear into stormwater management, expand the Wee trail back there, and trees. I mean, so many things.
So in the background, I've been quietly working with the director of planning and zoning about the concept of community benefit agreements. It's more geared towards residential areas. I don't even know who the community would be here, other businesses, but I agree with you, Alderman Savage. I think that this is something where we really are going to have to review the parking requirements, and where there's excess parking, say, no, you can't have that much. You have to convert it into a rain garden or some other environmentally sound thing. And this would be the perfect example of, if you want this permit,
Yeah.
what are you giving to the community? And we are writ large, the city residents are the community. And I think it's, I know we're kind of dragging you through this, Mr. Meekins, but I think it's time that we have across all the departments and the council a mindset change. We made an agreement with the comprehensive plan to change the way we're thinking about things, and this is one of the first ones out of the box. And I think it's time to start trying to implement some of those ways of thinking about things. So I'm going to try to find out when this is on the planning commission agenda and testify as a citizen. But I think we really do have to think in a new way.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the community benefit, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? I think taking some of those spots away to put trees, stormwater management would be a really huge benefit. But it sounds like it would impact their delivery. But it's certainly a
And we have to be
back and
willing
forth.
as a council to put our money where our mouth is. These things aren't free.
Yeah.
So we can tell them you can't have that much parking and it just lays fallow. But if we can provide some incentives through some kind of a fund that would convert macadam to plants, it could be less painful to the property.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I think it ties with our next conversation on the stormwater fee, right? As far as, I don't know if you've gotten to the stage of having a conversation with them, but to point out to the applicant, like, look, you're going to get charged this stormwater fee based on all this. This is going to be a quarterly fee you're going to have to pay, and council's been increasing it quite a bit lately, right? So to prevent that, they could put in stormwater management or trees to counteract that long-term fee. But because I think it's just going to get even, I mean, the benefit, I guess, to all this is that this site's going to actually have stormwater management, where I'm guessing it didn't have any before, right?
Correct.
So that is certainly a benefit. Any case, I think we made our point. We talked a lot about one project.
Please carry our message back to the
Yeah.
planning department.
Thank you for indulging
Tell
us.
them how much we harangued you.
But if there is anything we could do to help,
Sure. Well,
let us know.
I think we are not the only ones in this room talking about this and witnessing this.
Yeah.
So I think this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And Alderman Arnett, it's on the schedule for May 1st.
Okay, May 1st.
So,
Thank
didn't expect to talk that long on this one, and I know the time is short.
Yeah.
The other project, if you will, I would just like to bring to your attention is the 1316 Bay Ridge, which is Stokes Farm, Bay Ridge Avenue, that is.
1306. 13.
Yeah.
It's on the.
It's right by where David Stokes' family
Yeah,
house was.
It's the old farmhouse, and that is
Bay Ridge Road or Ave?
Bay Ridge Avenue, across from, I'll say, the old Nazarene Church.
Oh yeah.
Next to, there's a healthcare facility.
Yeah.
So that is a 8-lot subdivision, 7 new single-family dwellings, 1 existing to make it 7 + 1, 8. That has been submitted several times, and the department has been working along with the applicant for some on their design. It's gone back and forth several times, and it has recently come back in for review. It's also out for comment right now. The tentative timeline to go in front of the planning commission would be probably the beginning of June at the earliest right now. It encompasses it includes a extension, or not extension, but a new right-of-way, Stokes Farm, to get to these houses off of Hanson Street, which is off of President. It includes necessary stormwater management. There's none now, although the property is a large, mainly old farm. So that is currently being reviewed, and like I said, it's not on a schedule yet, but it is coming up.
That work.
I think we had that meeting at the library. I don't know if you were in attendance or not, but the applicant, I thought, did a very, very reasonable job of presenting the plan. There was pushback from the residents worrying about increased traffic coming in there. They didn't want any cut through, and I don't think anybody does, to Bay Ridge Road, because that would really be a disaster, especially as close to the light. But I'm wondering, because the applicant seemed pretty conscientious about noting comments from the residents who were there and bringing that back. Did that show up in his application report to the planning commission? I mean, the planning body?
Yeah, they've worked, and they, time is money, right? But they've taken a considerable amount of time, and they've heard. We've had many meetings, and they've heard from various departments. One of which was in respect to parking. They've accommodated, as best I can tell, and again, it's still out for review. They've accommodated parking on site on each property at least 2 spaces. Their requirement is 1. They're providing on-street parking as well. So they're not, that Hanson Street's partially improved and partially a paper street. There's no intention to connect to Bay Ridge. Like you said, that would be a disaster. So they are, from the department's eyes, they're putting some good thought into it. So it's thus far positive. I have not seen any architectural renderings of what the single-family dwellings would look like. I think at this point we're close to blessing the layout, and then once it goes before the planning commission, I'll recommend that they have some elevations at a minimum.
That would be good. I think there'll be some pushback from some on the council that this should be more dense and more affordable housing, but I don't think you would get that from the surrounding neighbors.
Yeah,
they would like to see less.
That's I get that. I get that. Yes.
Can we, Mr. Chair? Can we just right above Rocky Gorge?
Wait, can I comment on that real quick?
Oh.
I can't tell for sure if that large tree is supposed to remain or remove, just from glancing at the one in the
I believe it is to remain.
Oh, good. Okay. So my comment would be, it might be worth looking at an opportunity to close off the driveway egress on Bay Ridge, because I noticed they're proposing to add, for some reason, a large driveway turnaround past the historic building. But instead of putting that in, they could remove part of the old driveway and just have egress to the internal road, and then you remove that egress on Bay Ridge, which might be good.
Yeah, there was some comments. There were comments made about the dual access to that property, and then the likelihood of people, once they know that's there, using that as a cut through, and that homeowner, that would drive me insane.
Yeah.
So again, that's the design is still being worked out, but there were comments made about that.
Alderman.
So right above this project, and I'm looking at Rocky Gorge because Alderwoman Finlayson and I have been having some conversation about that. It says approved, but I thought the permit for that had been pulled.
Canceled. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's above before where you see the grading permit canceled. Above that is more or less just the history. So that has been canceled, and right now it's completely dormant. There was a potential suitor that has walked away to pick that up again.
But this is a property that is controversial for many reasons, but one of which was it had been unapproved, and then the Athens people came along, and all of a sudden it became approved again. When we see on the spreadsheet it's approved, I don't really feel it should be showing that it's approved. I think it should be canceled or suspended or something.
Yeah. So what column specifically are you looking at? Are you looking at the
I'm looking at the green that
the
says
F? So yeah. So that was anyway. That's the Forest Conservation Act that the FCE was approved. But yeah, and I understand your concern and your
yeah,
that can be scratched.
because this could be a candidate for affordable housing. Well, Alderwoman Finlayson and I will develop that more fully, but especially since all of the streetscape and so forth has already been put in there, I understand the owner is in some difficulty, so we might be able to swoop in, buy the property and turn it over, replan it to be more dense with affordable housing, particularly if we can figure out how not to send all of that traffic down Y'all Road and through the existing community. But, I guess maybe another column or something on the spreadsheet that indicates that this looks like it's approved and ready to go, and I think it's actually withdrawn. But
Yeah. I noted, and just for clarity on the column to the left of that, where you go down to the second to last line, GRD 20-0013 canceled.
yeah, I see that now.
So, but yeah, that is misleading.
Alderwoman Finlayson, did you want to chime in on that one?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Alderman Arnett, for reiterating our discussion. Mr. Meekins, I understand that there's a second purchaser in the mix now. Would he or she be able to pick up all of the approvals up until the GR 020 cancellation? Would a new developer be able to just, because that's what happened in the past. So as long as that property is still available, how available are the approvals?
That is a question I cannot answer fully. I mean, at a minimum, they would have to go through the grading permit process again. You're asking the prior approvals before you get to that process,
Yes.
where they are, and I don't have the answer to that question in front of me, but I can certainly get that answer for you. Obviously, because for future planning, if what Mr. Arnett or Alderman Arnett alluded to, the city's going to want to know that.
Okay, I won't ask another question, but I would hope that, and I've been in discussion with Mr. Jakubiec as well as Mr. Lyles about being prepared in the event that this second offer is not accepted, because that will give us opportunities in the city, not just for workforce housing, but for recreational amenities also. So I'm glad you clarified what was approved and where the cancellation was on your chart here. So thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. On the first page, I have three questions. I'm continually asked about the status of the Eastport Shopping Center. It's not really discernible from here, but my understanding is we're through all of the appeals process and everything, and the shopping center is approved to go forward at the will of the owner.
You know as much as I know with
Yeah,
that
so
statement.
we need to have some way to get the status of these projects cleared up. The Grissom Square project also. I understand that was held up because we found out we didn't really know where the pipes were, and that's going to be a terrible thing when we have to dig up that very busy intersection there at Bay Ridge and Tyler. You know, the pipes are all piled up in the front yard of the old house there. The old house is falling down more and more, and people want to know, you know, what's happening there. And so the Grissom Square and the Eastport Landing, the lofts at Eastport, are two things where it would really be good. I don't know who to get a definitive answer from. I have asked Mr. Jakubiak about it, and I got the same answer. I'll have to check. But I think we need to know.
I'll see if I can dig into that and get you an answer the next time I'm in front of the committee.
Thank you. And then Alderman Savage, I last week drove through Parkside Preserve and was looking at their stormwater barriers, and I'm not a professional like you are, but I had some queasiness about whether they were still keeping stuff from going into Quiet Waters Park. So, and again, I don't know how we monitor these things. It's not our job to do it, but it is our job to know the status of it and pay attention because we have constituents that want to know. So maybe you want to take a drive by with your county truck sometime and check it out. All that clay.
You're gonna
that
get me in
white
trouble if I
clay.
do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as far as no update on Griscom.
The only thing I know about Griscom, and this is came after I put this spreadsheet together, is apparently the owner, Pilley Development, has sold the development to Ryan Development, which that's just hearsay. That's the only thing I know. I don't know if it's on record as of yet.
Well, I don't know how to proceed at this point, but I think I brought this up last time. I don't know if this requires a policy change, but I would love to see some of these older record plats, like the ones for Griscom, but Rocky Gorge too, to give us the ability to get those record plats updated to reflect the type of development we want. Because I think in both cases, we're having, and especially with the Griscom, because it's in the Tyler Ave, what is he calling it? The complete neighborhoods,
Yeah.
Envisioning project. And, I think there are opportunities to make that development mesh better with that complete neighborhoods. And I don't know if the record plat is preventing us from doing any of that, because the record plat has a certain amount of, it's not set in stone per se, but it has some permanence to it, right?
Yeah, so I believe you referred to the Griscom subdivision as a zombie subdivision the last time we were here, which I think I had heard that term before, and I was like, that's exactly what this is. To your point, though, with the record plat, we've had exchanges within planning and zoning, the department. You can look at a lot of record plats, mainly in Anne Arundel County, where there's a disclaimer or certification that it's only good for X amount of period of time, normally a year before. And I don't think there's a standard language. The county might have one now, but I forwarded a couple different examples to the director at his request after hearing our discussion last time, where. If you're not pulling permits, I'll say within a year or within 2 years, the subdivision becomes null, And that really is a good mechanism. Obviously, this is a good example of why that mechanism would benefit the city, and why I think it's pretty much a requirement by the county. So that is in discussion. I don't have any additional answers, but it's out there.
Okay. Well, thank you. I would like to move on, unless there are any other questions from.
No, but I do
Maybe.
appreciate the report, and
Yeah, it's very
It's-
helpful.
good to
Yeah.
get it, and appreciate the sharing of the information with us. I just want to mention, so you hear it from us, Mr. Lashinsky and staff did a really great job on, I think, on the meeting we had on the Tyler Avenue development. I saw a lot of positive reactions from the community. So just know your department is doing a good job out in the community.
Appreciate that. I will convey that information. Thank you. I hope you all have a good rest of your afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thanks.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Next on the agenda, stormwater fee discussion. Could Public Works join us? And do you have a presentation?
Yeah, we have it.
Are you starting with FY 26? Oh, I see. Yeah. That's the presentation.
Sorry to keep you waiting so long.
Yeah.
All right. Mike Rosberg, Stormwater Program Manager for the City of Annapolis. We are planning to, we have a presentation on our, any updates we have related to the 26 Stormwater Rate Study presentation. We were going to present that first, and then we can talk about the FY24 Stormwater Watershed Report. And I'm going to just, with time, I'm going to quickly turn over to David and Ann.
All right, great. Do we have presentation? I can plug in if that,
Coming.
okay.
Are we looking at the Annapolis Stormwater Structure presentation?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe so.
I believe it's the third link in the agenda. We made some adjustments to it.
Right. I think we all have it, it's just the public doesn't. I mean, anybody who's watching.
Well, we do have it on our computers.
Okay. Sounds good.
I paid for the vacations loan that together. I bought some home lines for the outside. What else did you buy? What else did you buy? So far, we're not close to $10,000. That's all. Fortunately, if you spend $10,000 and you walk face to the house.
Here we come to the rescue.
So I want to know what mess did you buy? Did you buy? So we get to the house.
Even after it's plugged in, it's not going to be on the screen until I run back across, put it on.
on, so don't panic.
Okay.
What else did you find in the house? What items do you claim that, because that's what this is actually for. What items do you claim that Ms. Hancock kept that belonged to you when she told you to leave the second time? I have text messages. No, don't come back. I don't want to hear text messages. I want to hear what items you claim are your property that she kept when she told you to leave the second time. That was things, a fishbowl, a guppies, a pair of shoes, a tie. And if you say any of those things,
What are we listening?
because I don't waste my time with the guppies. So tell me what you are alleging.
There we go.
All right, perfect. All right, good afternoon. Thank you for having me again. Dave Hyder with Stantec. Today we're going to talk about the fiscal year 26 rate study for stormwater. And in terms of the agenda, I'm just going to start off just talking about the financial planning process. We'll talk about really what we term a revenue sufficiency test or analysis to determine whether the stormwater fees are going to generate enough revenues to cover the expenses. We'll then talk about the fee adjustments and some impacts and some comparisons with other jurisdictions. Just in terms of the process that we're in, I will be presenting at the April 29th Finance Committee meeting, the same information. So this is an opportunity to get some input in terms of what we're including in the budget and kind of a look ahead in terms of what we're presenting at that meeting. So in terms of the process that we take to look at the stormwater fund or the watershed restoration fund is essentially we look at a 10-year projection period where we're forecasting forward revenue requirements. So that's all the costs on the system. So that includes your operating and maintenance costs, any future capital, any existing debt service payments that you may have, any cash funded capital. And we use the fiscal year 26 budget as the starting point. And then we're forecasting from that forward using inflationary factors, talking with staff in terms of what we're seeing in terms of cost increases, things of that sort. We're also folding in the long-term capital improvement plan. And ultimately, that gives us a sense for the expenditures on the system or the revenue requirements over that 10-year period. We then do a forecast and look at your revenues on the system. So what are you generating from your current stormwater fees? If we don't change the stormwater fees, given changes in demand development within the city, how would the revenues change over time? And then we can compare those to our revenue forecast with the revenue requirements. And are we able to meet that revenue requirement? Are we maintaining the cash balances within the fund and any other key financial metrics? So that's the process. When we look at the revenue requirements for fiscal year 26, this is just a big picture summary. We're looking at about close to $3 million in total expenditures for stormwater in fiscal year 26. You can see the vast majority are related to operating and maintenance expenses. That's about 90% of the total expenses, $2.6 million. And then a little sliver, about $300,000, is related to existing and future debt, so funding of the capital improvement plan. Just big picture, some of the trends that we've seen over the last couple of years is you have ramped up your capital improvement spending, and that has drawn down on the the funds within the stormwater fund. As we look forward, the CIP for fiscal year 26 is going to be funded partially from cash from the capital fund and then partially from debt, so issuing new debt. And then looking forward, the vast majority of the CIP would be funded with new borrowings. And so diving into the operating expenditures and some of the detail is shown here on the next slide. Operating expenditures, as we've got them listed here, fiscal year 26, $2.6 million. Not sure why that keeps dropping. $2.6 million. That's about a 17% increase over the fiscal year 25 budget. The various expenditure items that are included would be salaries and benefits. You've got 9.5 full FTEs included, so that's $1.25 million. We're including the tree program at $515,000. You've got operations at $101,000.
Question on that: where where are the capital, the CIP expenses?
This is just operating expenses at this point.
But
Yeah.
but the previous slide you had 2.6 operating, and then you had 300,000 for debt service. But is the capital separate from even that?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And I do have that on a subsequent slide.
Okay.
Yep. I think part of it is the administrative charges have gone up some, and that's essentially the support services that the city provides. I think the addition of the tree program is a big component. Yeah, those are the main two changes. Yep.
And does this does this include storm drain maintenance costs, or is that considered part of the capital?
No, this does include storm drain maintenance.
So is that included? Where is that in the operations, I guess?
I believe it would be in operations as well as, I think, in contractual services. Is that
Correct. Yeah. Operations and contractual services make up the gray infrastructure maintenance, storm drains and inlets, manholes.
Okay.
any more questions on operating? Okay, so capital improvements as proposed for fiscal year 26 would be $1.8 million. And you can see the various categories. It's really stormwater management retrofit, which a portion of is funded from debt and a portion is cash funded from the capital fund. And then the MS4 permit compliance, we're assuming would be fully debt funded at $1.3 million. So that brings you to the total of $1.8 million in total capital for fiscal year 26.
Can you expand MS4 permit compliance? That's in addition to stormwater management retrofit of our BMPs, stormwater facilities, right? But what's underneath the MS4 permit compliance? Is that the other projects, restoration projects?
Yes. It's any minimum of the minimum control requirements we're required to meet with the state is we use that CIP for that project, and the stormwater management retrofit can be applied to retrofitting any existing BMPs or any other stormwater management retrofits. It can be BMPs or even other gray infrastructure. I believe it's described as any other stormwater conveyance in the city.
What about the is there I think there's a proactive inspection, camera video inspection program for stormwater, or do we just have that for sewer?
The CCTV that are operating, it's for both. It's spread out. It could be used for storm and sewer. That's not, I believe I would have to verify I don't want to misspeak, but that there could be I believe it's a portion of it split between water and sewer, or stormwater and sewer.
Is this, I always get the MS4 and the WHIP program confused. Does this have any of the WHIP program expenditures?
I believe the MS4, the city is a phase 2 MS4 jurisdiction. So we have certain requirements, minimum controls we have to annually report on and budget for. And the WHIP is a part of being in compliance with our MS4 requirements.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next step is just to look at, again, what I was talking about earlier is revenue sufficiency. So we're looking at over a 10-year projection period starting in fiscal year 26. And we're taking the operating expenses, any capital expenses, which are made up in the current fiscal year of existing and that new borrowing. So that's about $300,000. So total expenditures in fiscal year 26 for stormwater would be about 2.91. Total anticipated revenues from the stormwater fee in the current year would be about 2.61 million. So obviously we're running a deficit in the current fiscal year. And then if we just assume that we don't change the stormwater fees going forward, we're obviously going to see a little bit of growth we're anticipating because we have development on the system, additional ERUs, accounts paying the stormwater fee. But generally, it's going to stay around that $2.6 million, whereas our expenditures in the system are going to continue to grow as we take on those capital costs, incur additional debt service, operational cost increase. And so clearly the trajectory only gets worse going forward, expenditures versus revenues. And so if we were to play this out, one of the key metrics that we look at is the cash balance within the Water Restoration Fund. We have a little bit of positive balance at the end of fiscal year 25. But essentially, we would obviously, because our revenues on the system are not matching our expenditures, we would be depleting the cash balance very significantly in the future. So clearly, it's an unsustainable path to move forward with the current stormwater fees as they stand today.
Okay.
Mhm.
We'll go back a second. So based on the current fee percentage, if that doesn't increase, does that, increase period or increase as projected?
Increase period. So yeah, we're just saying our current stormwater fee is sufficient to cover your revenue requirements going forward.
So my other question is, because I remember Betsy presented a couple of years back that we're pretty much on target to meet our WIP, the target in the WIP. So if that's the case, are we able to kind of repurpose some of that money, presumably, to go towards some other, I guess, non-essential restoration, but also perhaps more towards some of the forestry program to meet that target? I'm just wondering what assumptions do we have as far as the capital expenditures? Is that based on, what target is that based on at this point? If you understand, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how much of I can answer it for now. I do know that we have restoration as part of our goals. We have a restoration requirement and goals that we have to meet by a certain date, and the state will be renewing the permit to have additional requirements later on, and that's still up in the air. We don't know what that is. So, but I think to your point, there can be a further look into seeing what is needed to make the goals and project what we might think might be coming next in the next, I forget what the time frame is, the next 5 years after it was when they're supposed to be implemented by. So I just know that the state is actively looking at what phase 2 programs are going to be required to, what their restoration goals will be in the future.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm also kind of asking is, like, what we have in mind for those particular projects moving forward, right? Because if we're no longer limited just solely focused on the WIP, and I know those goals might be updated, but still, maybe that opens up the opportunities for us to look at other things as far as going to these properties that have zero stormwater management and saying, hey, I would still presumably help us with our target, but to go to them and say, hey, we have money available to partner with you to install stormwater management on your property. I'm personally much more of a fan of that as opposed to just stream restoration, because I don't like the idea of turning the streams into our stormwater management facilities. The stormwater management should be happening upstream as opposed to in the stream, ideally, right? And so, I don't know. So do we have any, I know years ago we have put together a plan for potential BMP retrofits, but do we have something else that points towards what our planned project focus is going to be?
Yeah, I think you're right. I do think, yeah, we have, what I will say, I think the grant program that we have established with the trust, we are funding that through the Watershed Restoration Fund to see projects being put in the city that can go towards those restoration goals. And there's always a chance that we can further increase that, that contract and that program to see other, non-stream restoration projects be implemented that the city can fund and count towards these goals. But yeah, I think that's a work in progress to find other areas to help fund stormwater on other sites and do even just an overall evaluation of the city. Where can we possibly find areas that, whether it's doing outreach and other efforts to implement stormwater where there is none today, and using this fund to do that. That's still, I guess, it's still kind of being worked on and looked at.
Yeah. And it's so how much of this is going towards the grant program? So that's which in the stormwater revenue deficiency, which category does that fall under? Capital expenses?
The capital, it's the MS4 permit compliance. We are contributing, I believe, $350,000 this year to the Chesapeake Bay Trust Fund. And that's, I think this is our fourth year, and it had been 300,000 the first three. And this year we moved it up to 350,000.
Okay. All right, I'll stop. I know it looks like we're only halfway through. Interrupting a lot.
Sure. No problem. So again, just with the forecast, if we don't do any rate increases to the stormwater fee, we would fully deplete the cash balance within the stormwater fund. And so when we think about a financial plan, what we potentially need to do going forward, we are below, if I flip back one, we do want to try to maintain 6 months of operating expenses in this fund. And so in fiscal year 25, we're actually already below that. And so one of the considerations would be, in order to continue to meet the capital needs, meet the operational needs, as well as restore the cash balance, we do think you need to continue to increase the stormwater fee. The magnitude of those increases, changes year over year as we look at the needs, but we're thinking of 15% in fiscal year 26 would be appropriate, followed by another 15% in 27.
15% increase?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
But does this include, are these numbers based on a shift to the ERU model?
They're not at this point. So this includes 15%. If I go to, jumping ahead. Yeah, this is based on the current fee structure as it stands today, 15%.
Okay, but I think the plan is to shift to that for next fiscal year.
We're going to talk about that a little more in a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
This
the plan.
This is our
Right.
this is our current
Okay.
proposal.
Yeah.
But is this not a chart that we see almost every year?
Yeah.
Yeah. pretty
And
much.
I would like to say that when we started these fees, I argued that we were starting from way low, too low an amount. And it seems like now we're just getting to that realization inch by inch by inch. But,
Mhm.
and so when we get to the page where you're making the recommendations, I wonder if we really should think about fiscal 28 and 29 as being a little more robust, because it seems like we always fall behind. But to get ahead of you, if you go 2 pages, I'm looking at the fees for the families. That's the annual fee, right? So what they see on their quarterly bill, and I just paid my quarterly water bill, is 1/4 of these amounts.
This is so if we're jumping ahead to slide 11, this is the quarterly fee.
Oh, it is quarterly.
It is
Okay.
quarterly. Yep.
So it will be a healthy increase.
Yeah.
They'll notice it.
Yeah. So if you were to do the 15% in 26 and then 15 and then 6 and 6, essentially by fiscal year 28, we would be back to above our minimum target. We have you being above that target for a couple years, and then, depending upon how things play out, you'd potentially fall back below that target if we just keep it at 6%. But to your point, we do find that there's a lot of variation in future expenses, and therefore may have to be a little bit higher than 6% in future years. And what that looks like just under your current fee structure, so assuming we don't change the fee structure, if you do the 15%, your typical single family or all your single family customers would see a about a $5 increase in their quarterly stormwater bill. And then you can see how that plays out for multifamily per unit. And then for the non-residential, based upon the tier they fall into, based upon their impervious area. And then the final slide that I have is just in terms of some comparisons, where you currently stand at $30.83 for quarterly bill for single family. With the 15% increase in 2026, you'd go up to their 35. So you jump up above Tacoma Park. It's important to note, though, that these current stormwater fees for other jurisdictions are their current in-place fees, and it's often the case that other communities increase their fees on a fiscal year basis as well. So it's a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison from that perspective. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ann to talk about the fee structure and credits.
Thanks. Ann Roederer, Stormwater Engineer, Department of Public Works. So as the Alderman alluded to, last time we discussed changing the stormwater fee structure from a tiered to a measured impervious area for non-residential ratepayers to more accurately reflect the impervious conditions on the sites and the stormwater management practices. I will get closer to the microphone, sorry. And the stormwater management practices that are in place or could be in place. We also, at that time, recommended rolling out a concurrent credit program with the goals of providing incentive or opportunity to actively participate in stormwater management practices, maintain existing practices, and or otherwise engage in education engagement, other kinds of participation around stormwater management. Also to look at limiting new financial hardship for non-commercial, non-residential ratepayers, like religious institutions or nonprofits. So we have put together a work plan that is fairly aggressive to try to meet this change in structure within the next fiscal year. I'm not going to go through every detail of it, but I will say the intention is that today and on the 29th, we will be presenting the existing rate structure with the fee, with the increase, the 15% increase. And we hope to come back with an amendment to switch the non-residential structure towards this measured program in time to implement it for the new fiscal year. That said, our proposal is to implement it in the new fiscal year and then have a 2-quarter waiver for people to submit applications to the credit program and for us to review them and respond to them. So it's sort of like implement it in name and in code, but there will be a phase-in period because this is all a lot to do in a fairly short period of time. So at the moment, we are in the research and analyze phase, looking at models from other places, understanding our existing billing. I will say we do, in fact, have a credit program, sort of. It's in the code, but we don't really have an application to fill out anymore. But in that existing program, which offers a 50% fee discount, there are 3 existing non-residential commercial repairs. So there aren't too many people participating in the non-residential credit program at this point. So making this change and rolling out a new program, we're really hoping to amp that up. The analysis of that is obviously trying to model and predict and forecast what the impact would be on the revenue. So that's an iterative process of understanding how the program will be structured and what will qualify and what credits are available and how that goes back and forth between the revenues and the credits. So we will be presenting, or Dave will be presenting, the existing structure with the increase on the 29th, and then we hope to come back within the next month or so to make that proposed amendment. Yeah. During this interim time, and hopefully we can, well, maybe we could come back next month to talk with you about what we've learned and what, where we are in the progress of proposing a new program. We're going to address some of these issues over the next month, and we've already started working on it. But so who's eligible to receive the credits, and who's eligible for a financial hardship waiver if that's something we include, which stormwater management practices qualify, existing, new, what standards do they need to meet, what are the inspection requirements, what are the time periods allotted for the credit, does it renew automatically, does it have a 3-year program? So there are lots of questions to answer. There's also a lot of bureaucratic administration stuff to do, updating the code, creating a manual, creating a website. We're hoping to have a impervious area viewer for people to be able to see, what we're charging them for and to understand that. An application, a renewal process, all that administrative stuff. And then also just really defining the maximum credit people can get and how we calculate it, which can be super technical and in the weeds, or what we're aiming for is something pretty user-friendly and simple. But it goes down that super technical, weedy direction very fast. So it's a balance. So that's where we are today.
Oh, great. Any questions from the rest of the committee?
Well, actually, if you go to the last slide, it looks like we're down the drain.
I can't see Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yeah, what happened?
I don't have any
There she is.
questions. No, it was very
Oh, okay.
Okay.
concise.
Well,
I
so
appreciate it.
thank you. It's really good to see the proposed schedule. It's really good so we can conceptualize. It helps make sure we know what to expect. Or I know you said this is aggressive, though, so understand if we might need to push some of it. But it's good to hear. Thanks for trying to meet this. And so it sounds like you're saying if you can meet this schedule, the goal would be to implement the new structure next fiscal year. With the beginning or just some point in time during the fiscal year?
So we would implement it in the beginning of the year, but with the caveat that they have 2 quarters they have a quarter to apply for the credit.
Okay.
So it's basically implemented but waived for a period of time, just for the non-residential ratepayers. For the residential ratepayers, we're not proposing a change at this time.
For the non-residential, you're not proposing a change?
For the residential, we are
Residential.
not proposing a change. For the non-residential, we are
to the
proposing
ERU.
this change.
What's the total breakdown per use? So how much fees raised from residential? How much is raised from the? Do you have a breakdown of non-residential? I guess by tier, maybe. That'd be curious. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I don't have the tier. Do you have the tier?
No.
I have a kind of wag at the use. It's not highly scientific, but so in terms of, you want to know what the change would be, or?
No, I'm just curious how much of the fee we raise, total fee, comes from residential, single family, multifamily. How much of that fee comes from tier 1, 2, 3, non-residential? I'm asking because I think that'll also help give us an idea of.
Yeah, I'm going to deflect that back to Dave.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious which type of use is bringing in the most revenue.
Yeah. In terms of numbers, I think there's 900 non-single family parcels. And I think they bring in, we were estimating, I think they bring in about $1 million worth of the total revenues.
Residential.
And residential would bring in the difference. So for it, just thinking from that, yeah. So residential is probably, I think, about 1.6 million, and I think the non-residential, so in the tiers, about $1 million. Yep.
I'm still Okay, so well, are you going to be presenting a chart that includes the shift to the new model? Because right now the graphs and charts I'm seeing reflect the current structure with the current proposed percent increase, but I don't see one that shows all that with
Yeah.
the shift to the new model.
Yeah, we can definitely present that. I think the thinking is just to make sure that we have the information for the budget and the budget process. We need to go forward and say this is potentially the fee schedule, not knowing whether, whether it gets approved and whether the amendment happens. But essentially, I think what we would recommend would be 15% increase. And then if you do go to the ERU, it would generate additional revenue. I think anywhere from about $100,000 to $150,000 of additional revenue going to that type of structure before any type of fee change. And so likely we would recommend the 15% increase. And then if you do make the amendment, you do have the change, that would be additional revenue on the system, which would just allow you to lessen the increases in the future years.
Or increase credits.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing we don't know at this point is the participation level in the credits and how much that would reduce revenues. And so we wouldn't necessarily propose less than 15 because we think we're going to get additional revenue from the fee structure change, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and as far as just a tangent on the grant program, I think it's great. We need to have that, but I guess the other thing to just think about is maybe coordinate with planning and zoning, because in the comp plan we have identified green opportunity or environmental opportunity areas, if you called them exactly. And it'd be nice to have money set aside for those opportunity areas, because those are where we've identified for either adding trees or adding stormwater management and other potential uses, but just focused on the stormwater. That would give us full money to use on some of those initiatives and tie it with the comp plan like I said earlier. Another question. So the charts that you have provided, do those include the projected program cost for the forest program from Brian Adams? Because he charted out and they were increasing for the first few years. So just want to make sure those planned increases from Brian are incorporated into this.
So we have currently in there is the $515,000 for the tree program. Currently,
that's not enough. Because it was escalating, and that's what we have to plan for. Because that's to meet our 2050 goal, we have to meet the funding targets from Brian. That's what this whole fee has to be structured around. So that's what we need to get in our heads, because that is going to require an increase to the fee, but that's a whole other level. It's not just meeting the minimum bounds, meeting that with anticipated canopy goal cost.
Yeah, and we did have discussions with the budget manager in terms of assumptions on that 515, whether that should escalate. And I believe we were told that to keep it flat. But if we want to run a scenario where we show what it looks like if you increase that, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I mean, we need to plan, because that was the assumption from the committee was we want to look at how much that's going to cost to actually meet our, because if we're only funding 500,000, we're not going to meet our tree canopy goal. And we're going to throw that out in the trash, because I want to be serious. If we're setting this canopy goal, we have to fund what's needed. And that's where Brian came in. So if that's not what's being proposed in the budget, then I'm going to make that a budget amendment, because we need to, that's the whole plan is to try to.
I believe that was the number that they gave us for this year.
Yeah,
we just didn't escalate it out.
Yeah, just for this year. But
Yeah.
I know Brian had a whole formula.
Yeah,
right?
which we saw
And
presented.
this really came up once again when we were doing the Tyler Avenue plan, and was shown the real dearth of trees there, both street trees and in the yards, and there's plenty of opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think, we need to let both hands get caught up, and that will definitely have a fee impact. But stormwater trees are also part of protecting the environment, sucking up stormwater. So I think we want to do both.
Yeah, it's a lot of efforts working together between the on the other side of Public Works, the road efforts as far as redesigning Tyler Ave and Edgewood Road, incorporating trees into that. But frankly, those costs also, if it's adding trees, may end up part of it coming out of the Watershed Restoration Fund because it's all part of meeting that goal. So, in any case, I guess, okay, so I guess at this point, if that's not included, can you, because this is something we need for the budget to factor in, like, obviously the projected fee increases. So is that something you can get us for the next meeting as far as you're on page, oops. Oh, I'm sorry. Do something. I didn't
want to interrupt
see.
your thought. I was trying to comment. Jody Dickinson, finance advisor. I wanted to interject before to talk about the implementation of the possible fee increase from the additional change in the fee structure, that you would, even if we get there by July 1st and we can get a budget amendment in for the new fee, you'd want to change the fee schedule, but I would hesitate on changing the revenue estimates because we have 6-month waiver time period for applications, and then we're going to consider credits. So you're going to get nothing from the new fee in the first 6 months, and then you're going to have credits to apply. So we really won't have an idea what the extra revenue is going to be until we have that credit program in hand and we have a good estimate of who's going to get credits and how much. You can always have more revenue than you have budgeted. There's nothing that stops you from taking in more revenue. As far as your comment about the tree budget, the assistant city manager may have more information on this, but there was also talk, it's a little premature to talk about what we are putting in the budget until Monday, but there's also funds in the reforestation fund that from that large permit fee that we put in there last year. So
thank you.
that was some of the discussion about how much money is available to help meet your goals. So I know that played into it, but when they do their presentation for the budget, you can ask more questions about what's in there.
Yeah, thank you. And I believe Mr. Adams factored in the reforestation fund money. But I guess to your point, for this year's budget, it's fine to go with the 500,000 because that's really all we budget for is 1 year anyway. But for planning purposes, I would still like to see that what the projection looks like with the full forest cost so we can get an idea of future increases percentage wise. And just a suggestion on the charts, if you could include the percent increase. I mean, I guess you have it, I see it in an asterisk at the bottom. Assumes annual increases 15% for FY 26-27, then 6 year 6%. Okay, and then it's 6% for the rest of the period. Okay.
I guess just to clarify with Jody, to get Jody's thoughts, going forward for the discussion on the 29th, would it be appropriate for me to factor in additional tree budget for 27, 28, 29 at this point? Or should we wait?
I would have to defer that question to either the assistant city manager or the budget manager who is not available right now.
Hi, Assistant City Manager Vicki Buckland. I think that's in some sense that's, as far as a decision, that's clearly a decision that's ahead of us.
Right.
I think starting to get a sense of what like the wide set of parameters are, if we have had a range of potential outcomes, I think that's always useful for the city to have a sense of what the broader path is. But in terms of an actual number, that's obviously a decision that's ahead of us as part of the budget process.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, typically when in the fee reports that are put together, they do include projections of revenue.
Yeah.
Right. So that I think would need to be updated to reflect the.
I think
as far as revenue and expenses, particularly to reflect more accurately the planned forest program. Right.
Yeah, and the key question just from my perspective, is when we look at the needs in the system going forward, we can include more than 515 for the tree program so that we can show in 27, we're estimating if we were to fully fund the tree program from the stormwater fee, it would have this impact, and therefore the increases likely would need to be more in the future on the stormwater fee.
Yeah, and so the other thing, last thing I had was I'm still tempted. I know we had this conversation a little bit last time. I'm still tempted to jack the fee on those properties that do not have BMPs. And even if we just limit it to tier 4, tier 3 properties, because those have the most impervious surface, to say tier 3, tier 4 properties that have zero stormwater management. So it'd be like Nautilus probably, and like Giant, Safeway, all the grocery stores, right? Because I don't think any of them have stormwater management. I'd probably guess. But in any case, those would, to jack those up to say, well, your fee is going to be increased by, I don't know, 50%. Because you don't have any stormwater. So that's a different approach as opposed to just saying, the incentive program. I'm just trying to think. We need a way to actually incentivize them, push them to make these changes, and frankly, they should, I think, be paying more than the others because they don't have treatment. Now, I know those that do have treatment can go ahead and get the fee, but that still involves more work on. Not that, I mean, I don't think we should stop it, but I think that involves more staff work as opposed to just doing a calculation of all the tier 3, 4 properties that don't have BMPs and then jacking their fees by 50.
Yeah, I mean, the shift in the structure to the measured will have that impact. It will have a significant impact on
To
those.
the ERU model. you're
Those, well, they're both technically ERU model, but yeah, the one with which is not tiered, but straight measurement of their impervious surface will have a significant impact on those who are not currently implementing any practices. It's pretty sizable. I mean, none of it is sizable. They're just fees. It's not sizable enough to pay for practices. That's another story. But it definitely has that impact.
Well, that's one of the things I think I really want to see. So that chart you have on the chart here on page 11, showing the different tiers and the quarterly fees is after the shift to the new model. Again, what is it going to raise? But even beyond this, because this doesn't even tell us like a typical. If we could get even just a couple properties as an example of here's whatever. I'm going to pick on the Giant since it's in my ward. Here's the Giant shopping center. Here's how much they pay, so we get an idea of here's what they did pay under the old current system. Here's what they will pay, because that'll help us figure out. I think, well, is that really enough? Is that really going to pay for all this work we're trying to do, and is it going to be enough of an incentive, right?
Right. So that's kind of part of our analysis phase with this credit program is taking some actual property case studies and understanding, how to calculate it and make it work. To some extent, I mean, they are all idiosyncratic. Like there is not, you can't hold one up and say these rules will apply to all. Every site is different, and there's a lot of variation. But we're going to try to make it as simple as possible.
We can.
Because I want to, because I want to be able to help plan and zoning, and also us, so we can go to those properties and say, you go to Nautilus Point and say, hey, I really want you to, we're going to relax your parking requirements. We really want you to put in some trees in these old parking lots, right? But they need some kind of financial stick or carrot to actually get them to do that. And that's what I'm trying to get at with the fees need to be to a point where we can actually, it's a compelling reason for them to make the changes we want. We being, I think, the entire city, I think plan and zoning, we just wants to see those changes too.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's both sticks and carrots. The grant program is a great example of how we can.
Yeah, but typically
incentivize
you
them
don't
more.
see like these property owners doing it. Usually it's the residents who want to restore their community
Giants
free,
in there, right?
not necessarily a shopping center who wants to.
we have, excuse me, through our grant, we've got good relationships with a lot of the nonprofits, and they do a lot of great outreach to these types of properties.
Yeah.
And the Giant is, they have successfully got plans going for that one. So we talk about to meet our restoration goals too. The grant program has been really successful, and I definitely could see increasing us funding that to also help when these projects come in for construction, because construction fees are a lot to put in stormwater, giving even more to that to help these projects get completed.
Just one more thought, just in terms of an overall framing, just to remind everybody that stormwater fees are user fees, and so they're not necessarily penalty fees. And so there needs to be a correlation with the cost of service and the fee itself. And so generally, it'd be difficult to defend charging somebody arbitrarily 50% more or whatever just because they don't have specific management on their property or whatever. It essentially needs to be some correlation with the cost of service. If that makes sense. So it limits your, I guess, stick approach to some degree because it is a user fee from that perspective.
Yeah, I'd have to think about that because I mean, they are creating more pollution than the other properties.
You just have to quantify the cost of
Right.
it because it is a cost. It is
And
a user
then-
fee.
But
Yeah.
we can take a mixed approach. As you know,
Yeah.
we've talked about reviewing the parking requirements, and rather than requiring more parking, we may reverse that and say require less parking and give them options once they're reducing the amount of impervious surface. It cannot remain impervious, so it could just be torn up and made into a rain garden or a little park, which would be lovely along Forest Drive in front of the Giant. But we could go further and give them incentives to say, we're changing your parking requirement, and we'll encourage you to add additional mixed-use development on the property. So it could be along Forest Drive in the Giant parking lot. It could be more retail or office space on the first and possibly second, and then residential for 3 or so stories above that, which brings in more revenue to the property owner, adds to the value of the property. And so it shouldn't be unpleasant for them, but it would be more productive than having just a rain garden from their ownership perspective. So that's something we can do legislatively, and we've talked about it and haven't done it. But so it's not being punitive. Then it's actually saying you can't have as much impervious space, and you can do something, fairly anemic with it, or you could do something really proactive with it. And that is a big transit corridor, so it's a perfect place for mixed use and maybe more affordable housing to go in there. So anyway. Yeah. But I'm glad you're using your ward for the example.
And presumably the what am I looking at? The credit program. Why am I blanking on the word? But anyway, the credit program that you're working on is going to be based on the percent of treatment or something along those lines that the facility, whatever it is, provides.
Yes. Again, we want to try to keep it simple enough that it doesn't become a crazy engineering
Administrative headache. Yeah.
hoop for everyone, but yes.
Okay. Well,
Unless you want to do all the reviews yourself.
Yeah. No, thank you. All right. So any other questions, staff? All right. I think that concludes our agenda. Thank you so
Well,
much.
there
It was
were
very
other
excellent
attachments.
information.
Was there a reason why we had the other two attachments?
I think just for the record, I don't think there's nothing else you wanted to say, right?
Yeah, I believe the one was previous from 2 months ago's as reference.
All right, thank you.
All right. So I think that
The
anything
one
else
in the middle, though, I thought I wanted to. First of all, I wanted to say two things. One, My sister lives in Cedar Ridge, and all of the stormwater management things you've been doing there is not only good stormwater management, but it's lovely. It really improves the quality of the neighborhood. So thank you for that. But in terms of the Santec reports, I do get it's coming right now because we just got our quarterly water bill. I get a lot of questions about it, and what are you council members doing? And I'm able to say in good faith, we have an outside contractor who looks at this and does the analysis with the staff, and that seems to take a lot of the steam out of their angst of just knowing that it's not us, spending the tax and spend Democrats driving up their bills. So we do appreciate the thoroughness and the analysis that you give us.
Thank you so much. That was a really good presentation. Is there anything else for the good of the order? No, any motion? Or do you want to stay here for dinner? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Oh my gosh, I forgot to do the sustainability update. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I mean, we've exceeded our time, so I don't know how you want to handle that. If you want to ask, submit questions to me on your own.
Yeah,
or-
because I haven't even.
Yeah.
It's just been so hectic. I haven't had a chance to read it. Can we just bump her all up on the agenda next time? Sorry.
That's okay. We had a lot of things to go over in this meeting. Appreciate it.
Any burning questions from the committee? Nope. All right.
I wanted to ask about
No.
the
Cut off.
electric trolley cars.
All right. Any other?
And I want to get invited to go to Portland in April.
Oh my gosh.
We have to
Alderwoman
get
Finlayson, can you
Alderwoman-
save us with a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn, absolutely.
I couldn't hear, but I could read her lips.
Second.